wolves circled the trembling girl like death itself, but Chief Maddow stepped between them without fear. His presence sent the pack melting back into the pine shadows, their yellow eyes gleaming with reluctant respect. The girl collapsed to her knees in the snow, her torn dress offering no protection against the bitter Dakota wind. Maddow approached slowly, reading the terror carved into every line of her body. She flinched when his shadow fell across her thin hands, rising to shield her face as if expecting a blow. Dark bruises mottled her arms like storm clouds, some fresh, others fading to sickly yellow. Her bare feet were bloody from running across frozen ground. "Easy, little one," he murmured in English, his voice gentle as summer rain. "The wolves are gone." She peered at him through her fingers, blue eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from knowing human cruelty intimately. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming words that wouldn't come. Mato shrugged off his heavy winter cloak, the one decorated with eagle feathers and intricate beadwork that marked his status. Without a word, he wrapped it around her shaking shoulders, careful not to touch her skin. The girl's eyes filled with confused tears at this unexpected kindness. "You are safe now, Kunsky," he said softly, using the Lakota word for daughter. "No harm will come to you while I draw breath." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Maddow caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her as gently as he would carry a wounded bird. She didn't fight him. She was too weak, too broken. Her head lolled against his broad chest as he carried her toward the warm glow of the campfires. The other warriors who had been tracking the wolf pack gathered around, their faces curious and concerned. Mado's expression warned them to keep their distance. This frightened girl needed gentle hands and patient hearts, not curious stares. "Winona," he called to the elder woman emerging from her lodge, "prepare a place by your fire. We have a daughter who needs healing." The old woman's knowing eyes took in the girl's condition immediately. She nodded, already moving to heat water and gather healing herbs. Her movements were quick and efficient, born of decades tending to the wounded and lost. Maddow carried the girl into Winona's warm lodge, laying her carefully on soft buffalo robes. She clutched his cloak around herself like armor, those haunted eyes never leaving his face. Whatever she had endured had taught her that men meant pain, that kindness was just cruelty wearing a mask. "Rest now," he told her, backing toward the lodge entrance to give her space. "Tomorrow the sun will rise on a new day, and you will be safe to see it." As he stepped into the night, he heard her whisper something in a voice raw from screaming. It might have been a prayer or a plea, or perhaps just the sound of a soul too damaged to hope. But she was alive and she was here, and that was enough for now. The pack of wolves howled in the distance, but they would not return tonight. Something far more dangerous than wolves had driven this girl to their territory, and Maddow would make sure those demons found no purchase in his village. Clara woke to find gentle hands tending her wounds, but her body still jerked away from every touch. The elder woman beside her continued her ministrations with patient persistence, humming a low melody that spoke of rivers and growing things. "Hush, child," Winona murmured, her English heavily accented but warm. "These hands heal, not harm." The lodge smelled of sage and sweet grass, clean scents that couldn't quite mask the lingering odor of Clara's fear sweat. She lay rigid on the soft robes, every muscle tensed for flight, even though her body betrayed her with weakness. The old woman's touch was feather-light as she cleaned cuts and applied healing salve to bruises. Heavy footsteps approached outside, and Clara's breathing quickened to sharp hands. The lodge flap moved, and Chief Madow's broad silhouette filled the entrance. Clara scrambled backward, pressing herself against the lodge wall like a cornered animal. "Forgive me," Mato said immediately, reading her terror. He remained motionless at the threshold, making no move to enter her sanctuary. "I brought food." He held up a wooden bowl, steam rising from whatever nourishing meal it contained. Clara's stomach betrayed her with a loud growl, but she couldn't make herself reach for sustenance while he stood there. Every survival instinct screamed that accepting food from men came with a price she couldn't afford to pay. Mato seemed to understand. With deliberate care, he placed the bowl just inside the lodge entrance, then retreated several steps back into the night. "Eat when you are ready, Konski. I will be by the fire if you need anything." Clara stared at the bowl as if it might transform into a snake. Her husband had used food as a weapon, withholding meals when she displeased him, forcing her to beg and grovel for scraps. Kindness without conditions felt like a trap she couldn't identify. "He speaks truth," Winona said quietly, continuing to tend Clara's wounds. "Mato lost his daughter to the spotted sickness 3 winters past. His heart sees you as the child the Great Spirit took from him." Clara's eyes remained fixed on the food, her stomach cramping with hunger. The elder woman's hand stilled on her shoulder, offering comfort without constraint. "In this place, you choose," Winona continued. "Choose when to eat, choose when to speak, choose when to trust. No man here will force your hand." The concept was so foreign Clara could barely grasp it. Choice had been stripped from her life, so gradually she'd forgotten it had ever existed. She thought of her husband's hands, always taking, always demanding, always punishing. Then she looked at where Mato had placed the bowl, close enough to reach, far enough away that she could retreat if needed. Slowly she crept toward the food like a wild creature approaching a water source. The soup was rich with venison and wild roots, warming her hollow belly and bringing tears to her eyes. When had anyone last fed her without expecting something in return? Through the lodge opening she could see Mato sitting by the central fire, his back turned to give her privacy. Other warriors moved around the camp, but none approached her shelter. They respected the invisible boundary he had drawn around her, this space where she could heal without fear. For the first time in years, Clara finished an entire meal without looking over her shoulder or flinching at unexpected sounds. The feeling was so strange she almost didn't recognize it. It felt dangerously close to safety. When Clara screamed in her sleep, Mato appeared at the lodge entrance like a guardian spirit. She thrashed against the buffalo robes, caught in some nightmare that painted terror across her sleeping features. Her cries were wordless but spoke clearly of helplessness and pain. "No, please," she whimpered, her voice small and broken. "I'll be good, I promise I'll be good." Mato's hands clenched at his sides, but he didn't enter the lodge. Winona had warned him that the girl startled at any male presence, especially when vulnerable. Instead, he spoke softly from the doorway, his voice cutting through whatever dark dream held her captive. "You are safe, Konski. The dawn comes soon, and your enemies cannot reach you here." Clara's eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. She saw his silhouette against the dying fire and scrambled backward, seeking escape. Her breathing came in sharp gasps as the nightmare released its hold. "Forgive me," Mato said, remaining perfectly still. "The spirits whispered that you needed watching over." She stared at him, trying to separate dream from reality. In her nightmares, her husband's face twisted with rage, his fists promising pain for some imagined transgression. But this man's voice held only gentleness, and he made no move to approach despite her obvious distress. I had a daughter once, Mato continued, his voice heavy with old grief. Ayana. She was strong like you, brave like you. When the spotted sickness took her, I thought the Great Spirit had abandoned me. He paused, and Clara saw pain flicker across his weathered features. Perhaps he saved her to send me you. Clara's rapid breathing began to slow. No one had ever compared her to someone precious, someone missed. Her husband had called her worthless, useless, a burden that should be grateful for scraps of attention. She liked to braid my horse's manes with wild flowers, Mato continued, a sad smile touching his lips. Made them look like painted ponies from the old stories. The warriors teased me, but I never stopped her. Joy should never be silenced. Something loosened in Clara's chest at these words. Joy should never be silenced. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt anything resembling joy, but the concept called to some buried part of her soul. Why, she whispered, her first real words since arriving. Why help me? Mato considered her question with the gravity it deserved. Because when the wolves surrounded you, I saw my daughter's spirit in your eyes, not ready to give up even when giving up seemed the only choice left. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but they weren't the bitter tears she'd grown accustomed to. These felt different, cleaner somehow, like rain-washing dust from spring leaves. I don't know how to be anyone's daughter, she admitted, her voice barely audible. You don't need to know, Mato replied gently. You only need to let yourself be protected while you remember who you are beneath the wounds. As if summoned by their conversation, Winona appeared beside Mato with a cup of steaming tea. She entered the lodge without hesitation, settling beside Clara with maternal efficiency. Dream tea, she explained, offering the cup, helps quiet the angry spirits that visit sleeping minds. Clara accepted the warm cup gratefully, inhaling herbs that smelled of peace and forgetfulness. As she sipped, Mato retreated to his previous position by the fire, but she could feel his protective presence like a shield between her and the darkness beyond. Pilamaya, she whispered in halting Lakota, the word for thank you that Winona had taught her that morning. From his place by the fire, Mato's voice carried back to her like a blessing. Pilamaya Kunski, for trusting us with your healing. Curly husband's voice carried across the camp like poison, demanding his property be returned. Clara's blood turned to ice water as the familiar sound of his rage reached her ears. She pressed herself against the lodge wall, making herself as small as possible, while her heart hammered against her ribs. "Where is she?" the voice bellowed. "Where's my wife?" Through the lodge opening, Clara could see him striding between the fires, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the blue uniform that had once made her proud. 3 soldiers flanked him, their hands resting casually on their sidearms. They looked around the Lakota camp with barely concealed disgust, as if the very air offended them. Mato rose from where he'd been sitting, his movement fluid and dangerous. He positioned himself directly in the white man's path, arms crossed over his chest. The other warriors melted from the shadows to stand behind their chief, a silent wall of strength and solidarity. "You are not welcome here," Mato said, his English precise and cold. "Leave." Clara's husband, Lieutenant Robert Nash, laughed, a sound harsh as breaking glass. "I'm not leaving without what belongs to me. That girl is my legal wife, and I'm taking her home." "She belongs to no one," Mato replied evenly. "She chooses her own path now." Nash's face darkened with the fury Clara knew too well. "You have no authority here, savage. I represent the United States Army. and I'm ordering you to surrender my property immediately." The word property hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd been running for 3 days, driven by desperation and the memory of Nash's latest beating. He'd left her unconscious on their kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath her head. She'd awakened alone and seized her chance to escape, taking nothing but the torn dress on her back. "Your authority ends where my people begin," Mato said, stepping closer to Nash. Despite the soldier's guns, he showed no fear. "The girl came to us seeking sanctuary. Under our law, she is now my daughter. Touch her, and you touch my blood." Clara's breath caught. He was risking everything, his life, his people's safety, for a broken woman he'd known barely a week. Nash had connections, influence, men who would listen when he claimed the Lakota had stolen his wife. "Your law means nothing," Nash snarled. "She's coming with me right now, or I'll be back with a full company to burn this place to the ground." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Clara knew he meant it. Nash never made empty promises when it came to violence. The thought of these gentle people suffering for her protection made her sick with guilt. She struggled to her feet, Winona's steadying hand on her arm. Her legs shook, but she forced herself to stand straight. If she had to choose between her freedom and their safety, there was really no choice at all. But as she stepped toward the lodge entrance, ready to sacrifice herself to save them, Mato's voice cut through her despair like a blade. "Kunsky," he called without turning around, "do you choose to go with this man?" The simple question stopped her cold. Choose. That word again, the one that seemed foreign on her tongue. Clara looked at Nash's red face, his clenched fists, the familiar promise of pain in his eyes. Then she looked at Mato's broad back, the protective stance of the warriors, Winona's encouraging nod. "No," she whispered. Then, louder, stronger, "No, I choose to stay." Nash's roar of rage echoed across the camp, but Clara stood her ground. For the first time in her marriage, she had chosen herself over his anger. The feeling was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "Then you have your answer," Mato told Nash flatly. "My daughter has spoken." The adoption ceremony painted new life across Clara's scarred heart with every sacred word spoken. She knelt in the center of the camp circle, wearing the beautiful doe-skin dress Winona had crafted for this moment. Eagle feathers adorned her dark hair, and intricate beadwork covered her shoulders like armor made of art. Mato stood before the sacred fire, his voice carrying across the gathered tribe as he spoke the ancient words that would make Clara truly his daughter. The flames danced higher as he called upon the Great Spirit to witness this bond forged not in blood but in choice and love. "Hear me, Wakantanka," Mato intoned, raising his arms to the star-filled sky. "This woman came to us broken by cruel hands. We have seen her spirit heal like the prairie after winter's end. Today, we claim her as our own." The elder medicine man stepped forward, painting sacred symbols on Clara's forehead with red clay mixed with prairie sage. Each mark felt like a blessing, washing away the shame and worthlessness her husband had branded into her soul. She was no longer the cowering woman who had stumbled into their camp weeks ago. "What name do you take, daughter of the Lakota?" the medicine man asked in ceremonial tones. Clara had thought long about this moment. Winona had explained that she could choose any name that spoke to her heart, leaving behind the identity that had brought her only pain. She looked at the faces surrounding her, kind faces, protective faces, faces that looked at her and saw worth instead of burden. "Watsinhin Najin," she said clearly, "she who stands with patience." Mato's eyes shone with pride at her choice. Patience had been the first gift he'd given her, the space to heal without pressure or demands. Now it would be part of who she was forever, a reminder of how love could grow in soil that seemed too damaged to nurture anything. The tribe erupted in celebration, voices raised in songs that welcomed her home. Women came forward to embrace her as sister, offering gifts and friendship. Children who had watched her healing from careful distances now approached with shy smiles, accepting her as part of their extended family. As the ceremony continued into the night, Clara felt something she'd thought lost forever settling into her bones. Belonging. Not the desperate clinging of someone grateful for scraps, but the deep roots of someone who had found her true home. Later, as the celebration wound down and families retreated to their lodges, Mato walked beside her toward the warm glow of Winona's fire. The old woman had prepared a feast in Clara's honor, her way of showing approval for the choice they'd all made. Regret sits heavy in some hearts, Mato observed quietly. Does it weigh yours tonight? Clara considered his question seriously. She thought of her childhood home, the family who had disowned her when she'd married Nash against their wishes. She thought of the life she might have lived if she'd been stronger, braver, smarter. Then she looked around the camp that had become her sanctuary. No regret, she said firmly, only gratitude. And tomorrow, he asked, when the white man's world calls you back? Clara stopped walking and turned to face the man who had saved her in every way that mattered. In the firelight, his weathered features showed the kind of strength that came from facing loss and choosing to love anyway. Tomorrow I wake as your daughter, she said, the Lakota words flowing easier now. 8. Father. The word hung between them like a bridge spanning years of grief and healing. Mato's face transformed with joy so deep it made her throat tight with unshed tears. Tomorrow and all the tomorrows after, he agreed, pulling her into the kind of embrace she'd never known. Protective, unconditional, asking nothing in return. As they settled around Winona's fire to share the celebration feast, Clara realized this was what home felt like. Not a place where you were tolerated, but a place where you were treasured. Not a trap that held you prisoner, but a sanctuary that set you free to become who you were always meant to be. The daughter of a Lakota chief who had seen her worth when the world saw only damage.